Korean Mafia boss was declared dead when there was no pulse for 12 minutes. Until a black waitress walked forward and did something that froze every doctor in that room. The fluorescent lights of Songdo Memorial Hospital's trauma wing flickered at 3:47 a.m., casting shadows across pristine white floors that would soon be stained red. In room 304, a man lay dying. Not peacefully, not quietly, but with the violent, desperate struggle of someone who'd survived too much to surrender now. Park Min-jun, 28 years old, leader of the most powerful Korean syndicate in Los Angeles, had a piece of his own car's steering column lodged 2 millimeters from his heart, and his pulse had just stopped for the third time in 20 minutes. Clear! Dr. Nathan Rodriguez pressed the defibrillator paddles against Min-jun's chest. The body convulsed. The monitor flatlined again. Damn it. Charging to 300. Someone get me his medical history. Does he have any? He's allergic to standard anesthetics. A voice cut through the chaos. Every head turned toward the doorway where a young black woman stood, still wearing her waitress uniform from Pearl Garden restaurant, the hem splattered with what looked like soy sauce, but was actually her boss's blood. Her name tag read Zendaya in cheerful letters that contrasted sharply with the terror in her dark eyes. Severe reaction to propofol. It's in his file. You gave him propofol, didn't you? Dr. Rodriguez's face went pale. How do you, who authorized you to be in security? I'm the one who called the ambulance. I rode with him. Zendaya's voice shook but held firm. And I'm telling you, if you gave him propofol, you're killing him faster than the steering column. His body's going into anaphylactic shock on top of the trauma. You need to... Miss, I don't care if you're his girlfriend. You need to... The monitor flatlined completely, the steady tone that meant death. Dr. Rodriguez swore viciously and resumed compressions, but Zendaya saw what the others didn't. The slight discoloration around Min-jun's lips, the way his throat had begun to swell, the hives erupting across his chest. This wasn't cardiac arrest from trauma. This was his body shutting down from an allergic reaction while simultaneously bleeding out internally. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because 12 hours earlier, Zendaya Hayes had been worrying about completely different things, like whether the new hostess, Maria, was going to show up for her shift, whether Table 7's businessman would leave more than a 10% tip, whether her manager would notice she'd been studying medical journals during her break instead of folding napkins. Small concerns, manageable concerns, the kind that didn't involve watching your employer die on a hospital gurney while doctors scrambled to save him. 12 hours earlier, 3:00 p.m., Pearl Garden restaurant in Koreatown, Los Angeles. Zendaya was in the back prep area, apron tied tight, hair pulled into a neat bun, reviewing flashcards hidden behind a stack of menu boards. Anatomy, pharmacy, emergency medicine. The subjects she'd been forced to abandon 3 years ago when her mother's cancer treatment depleted their savings, and someone had to work full-time. Zendaya! Jin Soo, the head chef, called out. Boss wants to see you. Now! Her stomach dropped. In the 6 months she'd worked at Pearl Garden, she'd seen Park Min-jun exactly 4 times. The owner rarely appeared at his own restaurant, leaving operations to his managers while he handled what everyone whispered about, but no one dared ask. His other businesses. The ones that kept Pearl Garden running even when the dining room was half empty. The ones that explained why men in expensive suits sometimes arrived after hours, why certain rooms were always locked, why the staff knew better than to ask questions. Zendaya climbed the stairs to the second floor, where Min-jun kept an office that felt more like a war room. She'd only been up here once during her interview, and the memory was burned into her brain. Dark wood paneling, traditional Korean art on the walls, and Min-jun himself sitting behind a massive desk with eyes that saw too much and revealed nothing. She knocked. Come in. His voice was deep, lightly accented, the kind that made you pay attention. Inside, Min-jun was reviewing documents, a glass of whiskey untouched at his elbow. He was handsome in a dangerous way. Sharp cheekbones, intense eyes, a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow that somehow made him more attractive instead of less. He wore his wealth casually, designer shirt with rolled sleeves, expensive watch, an air of authority that had nothing to do with clothes and everything to do with the knowledge that he could destroy you with a phone call. Miss Hayes, sit. He didn't look up from his papers. Zendaya sat, mind racing through possible reasons she'd been summoned. Had she done something wrong? Was she being fired? Had someone complained? You've been with us 6 months, Minjun said, finally meeting her eyes. Your performance reviews are excellent. Customers request your section. Tips are above average. No complaints, no drama, no missed shifts. Thank you, sir. So why are you reading medical textbooks in the storage room? Zendaya's breath caught. How did he? Of course he knew. He probably knew everything that happened in this building. I was studying during my break. Personal time. It didn't interfere with... I didn't say it interfered. Minjun leaned back, studying her with those unreadable eyes. I asked why. You have a degree? 2 years of pre-med at USC. Before... She hesitated. How much should she share? Before your mother got sick and you had to drop out to work full-time. He said it matter-of-factly like he was reading from a file, which he probably was. Lung cancer, stage 3, treatment at Cedars-Sinai. Expensive. She's in remission now, living with your aunt in Atlanta. You stayed in LA because you have more job opportunities here. You work here 5 days a week, tutor pre-med students online for extra money, and you're trying to save enough to finish your degree. You want to be an emergency medicine doctor. Zendaya stared at him, somewhere between impressed and violated. You investigated me. I investigate everyone who works for me. Your background check was unusually interesting. He pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. You graduated top of your class at Crenshaw High. Full scholarship to USC, 3.9 GPA, glowing recommendations from your professors. You were on track to be exceptional, and then you disappeared. I didn't disappear. I made a choice. Family first. Admirable, wasteful, but admirable. Minjun opened the folder, revealing documents Zendaya recognized, her old transcripts, her research papers, letters of recommendation. I'm not trying to insult you, Miss Hayes. I'm trying to understand you. Because in my experience, people don't give up their dreams without a fight, which means you're either a quitter or you're waiting for an opportunity to get back in the ring. What's your point, Mr. Park? My point is that I have a proposition. I need someone with medical knowledge, someone discreet, someone who understands that some situations require unorthodox solutions. He paused, letting that sink in. I'm willing to pay for you to finish your degree. Full tuition, living expenses, everything. In exchange, you work for me exclusively. Here at the restaurant, yes, but also elsewhere when needed. Zendaya's mind raced. This was an offer too good to be true, which meant it came with catches that could destroy her. When you say elsewhere, you mean your other businesses, the ones no one talks about. I mean situations where someone gets hurt and can't go to a hospital without attracting attention from police, where discretion is worth more than credentials. Minjun's expression didn't change. I'm not asking you to become a criminal, Miss Hayes. I'm asking you to be available when my people need medical assistance that can't be official. Basic emergency care, wound management. Nothing that would compromise your ethics or future license. That's exactly what would compromise my future license. Treating people off the books, no documentation, probably helping criminals avoid arrest. You'd be saving lives. Isn't that what you wanted to do? He cut her off smoothly. The people who work for me are still people. They bleed like anyone else. They deserve care like anyone else. And if you're there, maybe they survive instead of dying in an alley because they're too afraid to call 911. It was a compelling argument, a dangerous one. Zendaya looked at the folder on the desk. Her past, her dreams, everything she'd sacrificed laid out like evidence. And if I say no, then you keep working here as a waitress. No retaliation, no consequences. This conversation never happened. Minjun's voice softened slightly. But Miss Hayes, opportunities like this don't come twice. You can spend the next 5 years saving pennies, hoping to scrape together enough for 1 semester at a time. Or you can say yes, finish your degree in 2 years, and start your residency with zero debt and real-world experience that will make you invaluable. Why me? You could hire an actual doctor, someone already licensed. Because doctors ask too many questions. They have ethics boards breathing down their necks. They're mandated reporters. He leaned forward, eyes intense. You're hungry enough to take a risk, smart enough to handle the work, and you have something most doctors don't. You understand what it's like to be invisible, to be overlooked. The people I'd need you to help, they're invisible too. You'd actually give a damn whether they lived or died. Zendaya sat in silence, weighing her options. This was crazy, illegal, potentially life-destroying. and also her only real shot at finishing what she'd started, at becoming who she was meant to be. I need to think about it, she said finally. You have 24 hours. Minjun pulled the folder back. After that, the offer expires. That night, Zendaya called her mother in Atlanta. Baby girl. Her mom's voice was warm despite the late hour. What's wrong? You only call this late when you're spiraling. I got offered something, a deal. It could change everything, but mama, it's complicated. Complicated how? Illegal complicated or morally gray complicated? Both, maybe. I don't know. Zendaya paced her tiny studio apartment, staring at rejection letters from financial aid offices tacked to her wall like motivational posters of failure. Someone wants to pay for me to finish school, full ride, but in exchange I'd have to work for them in ways that might not be completely above board. Silence on the other end. Then, is this about drugs? No, mama, medical work, emergency care for people who can't go to hospitals. So criminals? Probably, yes. More silence. Zendaya could picture her mother in the small house she shared with Aunt Teresa, sitting in her recliner, the one they'd bought after she finished chemo, wearing her favorite robe with the coffee stains she refused to throw away. Finally, you remember what I told you when you dropped out to take care of me? You told me I was throwing my life away. I told you that sacrifice without purpose is just suffering. You sacrificed for me, and I'm grateful every day. But baby, you can't sacrifice forever. At some point, you have to fight for your own dream again. Her mother's voice was firm. If this is your chance, and you can do it without losing yourself, then maybe it's not a deal with the devil. Maybe it's just survival in a world that doesn't hand out second chances. What if I get caught? What if I lose everything? What if you spend the rest of your life wondering what if, her mother countered. Zendaya, you're 26 years old. You're brilliant. You're capable. And you've been treading water for 3 years, barely keeping your head above the surface. Maybe it's time to swim, even if the water's murky. The next day, Zendaya climbed the stairs to Minjun's office and knocked. When he called her in, she didn't sit, just stood across from his desk and said, I have conditions. Minjun's eyebrow lifted slightly. I'm listening. First, I won't do anything that directly harms someone. No poisonings, no helping dispose of bodies, nothing that makes me an accessory to murder. Second, if I think someone needs a hospital, they go to a hospital, no arguments. Third, you pay for malpractice insurance somehow, because if something goes wrong, I'm not losing everything because you were too cheap to cover your ass. Fourth, you're negotiating. There was something like amusement in Minjun's voice. You made me an offer. I'm accepting with stipulations. That's how deals work. Zendaya crossed her arms. Fourth, once I graduate and pass my boards, this arrangement ends. Clean break. No obligations, no leverage, nothing that could jeopardize my license. You get 2 years of my service, I get my degree. After that, we're done. Minjun studied her for a long moment. Then he stood, pulled out a contract from his drawer, already prepared, like he'd known she'd say yes, and clicked a pen. I'll add your conditions. You'll review it with a lawyer before signing. My lawyer, but an actual lawyer who will explain every clause so you can't claim coercion later. Why are you being so reasonable about this? Because, Miss Hayes, I need you to want to help my people, not resent being forced to. He began writing addendums in precise handwriting. Resentful employees make mistakes. Mistakes in my world cost lives. So yes, I'll accommodate your conditions, because ultimately we want the same thing, for you to be exceptional at what you do. 2 days later, after reviewing the contract with Minjun's lawyer, who seemed surprised by how fair it actually was, Zendaya signed. Her tuition for the next 2 years was paid within 24 hours. She re-enrolled at USC for the spring semester, and 3 weeks after that, at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, she got her first emergency call. The text came from an unknown number, 2847 East 7th Street, back entrance. Bring your kit. MJ Zendaya's heart hammered as she grabbed the medical bag Minjun had provided, stocked with everything from suture kits to broad-spectrum antibiotics to emergency medications that definitely required a prescription she didn't have. She drove to the address, an industrial building in a sketchy part of downtown, and found the back entrance propped open. Inside, 3 men waited. One was bleeding from his shoulder, another had a gash across his ribs, and the third, the one who wasn't injured, was pointing a gun casually in her direction. Not threatening exactly, just present. You the doctor? The uninjured one asked in Korean accented English. Medical student, close enough. Zendaya forced her voice steady and approached the shoulder injury first. Gunshot wound through and through, missed the bone. Lucky. What happened? What do you think happened? The man with the gun didn't smile. We had a disagreement with some people. The disagreement got physical. Boss said you'd fix us up, no questions. I need to ask medical questions. Was this a hollow point or full metal jacket? Were you shot from close range? Have you had a tetanus shot in the last 10 years? Zendaya cleaned the wound, noting that it was relatively clean. Through muscle, no major vessels hit. She could work with this. The injured man answered her questions while she worked, and Zendaya fell into the rhythm she learned in her clinical rotations. Assess, clean, treat, monitor. The shoulder wound got irrigated, packed, and bandaged. The rib gash needed 17 stitches, which she placed with steady hands despite her racing pulse. When she finished, the man with the gun lowered it. Boss said you were good. Didn't believe him until now. They'll live? If they don't get infections, they need antibiotics. She handed over pills from her kit with dosage instructions. And if anything gets worse, fever, increasing pain, discharge, they need a hospital. I don't care what your boss says. I'm not watching someone die of sepsis because you're too stubborn to get real medical care. Noted. The man actually smiled this time. What do we owe you? Nothing. This is between me and Mr. Park. Zendaya packed up her kit, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. But for the record, you should reconsider your career choices. Disagreements shouldn't involve guns. You'd be surprised what requires guns in our line of work, Doc. Over the next 4 months, Zendaya got 17 more emergency calls. Stab wounds, broken bones, one case of acute alcohol poisoning, and a terrifying incident involving someone who'd been exposed to industrial chemicals and was going into respiratory distress. She saved them all. Patched them up in warehouses, back rooms, and once in a car parked behind a church. And through it all, she barely saw Min Jun. He'd text locations, wire payment directly to her tuition account, leave detailed notes about what supplies needed restocking. But he never appeared at these emergencies himself, and at the restaurant, he remained as distant as ever. An owner who occasionally appeared to check on operations, but never stayed long enough for real conversation. Until one night in late March when Zendaya was closing her section and heard raised voices from upstairs. Not unusual, Min Jun had meetings that sometimes got heated. But this was different. The voices were angry. Then there was a crash. Then gunshots. Zendaya froze. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to call 911. But her contract was clear. Discretion above all. And those could be Min Jun's people up there. Could be Min Jun himself. She grabbed her medical kit from her locker and climbed the stairs on shaking legs. The second floor was chaos. Overturned furniture, broken glass, and 3 men lying on the ground. 2 weren't moving. The third was clutching his stomach, blood seeping between his fingers, trying to crawl toward the exit. And Min Jun was slumped against his desk, one hand pressed to his side, the other still holding a gun. His white shirt was red. His face was pale, but his eyes were alert, tracking Zendaya as she rushed toward him. You shouldn't be here, he said, voice strained. It's not safe. They might come back. Shut up and let me see. Zendaya pushed his hand away from the wound. Gunshot, left side, possibly hit his spleen or kidney. This was bad. This was hospital bad. We need to call an ambulance, now. Can't. Police will come. Questions I can't answer. Min Jun's breath was coming in short gasps. Just patch me up like the others. I'll be fine. You won't be fine. You're bleeding internally. You need surgery. You need... She saw his eyes starting to glaze, shock setting in. Okay, we're going to the hospital whether you like it or not, and we're figuring out the police situation later. But right now, you don't get a vote because you're about to pass out. She called 911, gave the address, reported a shooting. Then she did what she could, applied pressure, elevated his legs, kept him talking. Around them, the restaurant staff had heard the shots and called the police anyway, so sirens were already approaching. The others, Min Jun managed. My men, Zendaya checked quickly. 2 were dead. The third was fading fast from a gut shot. She couldn't save him, not here, not with these resources. But she tried anyway, working frantically until paramedics burst through the door and took over. At the hospital, police separated everyone for questioning. Zendaya told them the truth. Mostly. She was closing her section, heard gunshots, ran up to help, found her boss injured. No, she didn't see the shooters. Yes, she'd rendered first aid. No, she didn't know anything about his business beyond the restaurant. They kept her for 3 hours asking the same questions, different ways, but ultimately let her go. Business dispute, they concluded. Rival gang hit. The deceased shooters were identified as members of a competing syndicate. Self-defense was likely. Mr. Park would be questioned when he woke up from surgery. If he woke up. Zendaya sat in the waiting room, still wearing her bloody uniform, staring at the surgery board that listed Min Jun's status as in progress. She should go home, should shower, should process the trauma of watching 3 men die in front of her. Instead, she stayed, gripping cold coffee, unable to leave until she knew he'd survived. At 2:15 a.m., a surgeon emerged, Dr. Rodriguez, young and exhausted, scanning the waiting room. Family of Park Min Jun? Zendaya stood. I'm his employee, the one who called the ambulance. Is he? He made it through surgery, barely. The bullet nicked his spleen and kidney. We had to remove the spleen, repair the kidney. He lost a lot of blood, went into shock twice on the table. But he's stable now. Critical, but stable. He'll be in ICU for a few days, then step down if there are no complications. Relief flooded through Zendaya so strongly she had to sit down. Can I see him? Are you family? What was she? His illegal back alley medic? His waitress? His weird business associate? I'm the closest thing he has right now. Dr. Rodriguez studied her, seemed to make a decision. 5 minutes, ICU room 304. But he's sedated. He won't know you're there. Zendaya found his room, slipped inside quietly. Min Jun looked different like this, vulnerable. The man who commanded rooms with a glance was now pale and still, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped steadily. She stood beside his bed, watching his chest rise and fall, and felt something shift inside her. This was her boss, the man paying for her education, someone she barely knew beyond professional interactions and emergency texts. And yet, seeing him like this, she realized she'd been lying to herself. Somewhere between the contract signing and the emergency calls and the quiet moments when he'd check in via text to make sure she was handling the stress okay, she'd started caring. Not professionally, personally, which was stupid, dangerous, the kind of thing that complicated everything. But as she reached out and squeezed his hand gently, careful of the IV line, she couldn't deny it anymore. You're not allowed to die, she whispered. You hear me? You don't get to make me care and then die. That's not how this works. His hand was warm in hers, alive, and Zendaya held it for another 3 minutes before forcing herself to leave, to go home, to try to sleep despite the images burned into her brain. Min Jun woke up 2 days later. Zendaya was there when it happened. She'd been visiting during her breaks from restaurant shifts and study sessions, telling herself she was just checking on her investment, making sure her benefactor survived. Nothing emotional about it. His eyes opened slowly, confused at first, then focusing on her. Miss Hayes. His voice was rough from intubation. You're still here. Someone has to make sure you don't die and leave me with unpaid tuition. She tried to sound casual, professional. How do you feel? Like I got shot, which I did. He tried to sit up, winced, gave up. The others? 2 of yours didn't make it. I'm sorry. The shooters are dead. Police ruled it self-defense after reviewing the scene and the restaurant's security footage. You're clear legally, but... She hesitated. But you've got a lot of people very interested in what happened. Your organization, the rivals, the police are still watching. Standard, I'll handle it when I'm out of here. Min Jun's eyes found hers again, and there was something new in them. You saved my life. You didn't have to stay. Could have run when you heard the shots. Why didn't you? Because people were hurt. Because that's literally what you're paying me for. Zendaya adjusted his blanket unnecessarily, avoiding his gaze. And because, despite everything, you've kept your word. Fair deal. No coercion. You've given me my future back. Least I could do was try to give you yours. That's not why. His voice was soft but certain. Tell me the real reason. Zendaya met his eyes finally, and the intensity there made her breath catch. I don't know what you want me to say. The truth. Always the truth with me, Zendaya. First time he'd used her first name. It changed everything and nothing. Why did you risk yourself? Because I care. The words came out before she could stop them. Okay? I care. About you. As a person. Not just as my boss or my benefactor or my morally complicated business arrangement. I care, and I hated seeing you hurt, and I stayed because the alternative was leaving you to die. Happy now? Minjun's expression softened in a way she'd never seen. No, because now I have to tell you something that makes this even more complicated. What? I didn't choose you randomly for this position. I'd been watching you for months before I made the offer. Saw how you treated customers, the homeless guy you'd sneak food to, the elderly Korean woman who didn't speak English that you'd patiently help despite the language barrier. Saw how you studied during every break like your life depended on it. And I thought, that's someone who actually gives a damn. Someone who'd fight for strangers. That's why I investigated you. That's why I made the offer. I don't understand what you're saying. I'm saying I noticed you before I needed you. And every time you showed up to those emergency calls, competent and caring and brave, I noticed you more. And now you're sitting here after watching me get shot, holding my hand when you think I'm asleep, telling me I'm not allowed to die. And Zendaya, he paused, struggling with words. I care too. More than I should. More than is wise. But I've never been good at denying what I want. The confession hung between them. Zendaya's mind raced. This was her boss, her employer, the man who'd given her everything. Getting involved romantically was a disaster waiting to happen. Would complicate the contract, the power dynamics, everything. This is a terrible idea, she said. The worst, he agreed. We barely know each other outside of emergencies and business. Then we should fix that. Get to know each other properly. See if this is real or just trauma bonding. Zendaya should say no, should establish boundaries, should protect herself from the inevitable complication. Instead, she squeezed his hand and said, when you're out of here, buy me dinner. Somewhere that's not the restaurant. Somewhere we're just two people. Deal. Minjun's smile transformed his face. But you're choosing the place. I've been shot. I deserve special treatment. You're going to milk this, aren't you? Absolutely. I nearly died. That's worth at least 3 weeks of sympathy. They both laughed and something warm settled in Zendaya's chest. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of something that could become hope if they were brave enough to let it. Minjun was discharged 6 days later. Zendaya picked him up from the hospital. He'd insisted, said his people were too busy dealing with fallout from the shooting. But she suspected he just wanted time alone with her. So, she said as they drove back to his place, a penthouse apartment in downtown LA that she'd never seen. What happens now? With your organization? The rivals who tried to kill you? They're handled. We've reached an understanding. Boundaries have been reestablished. They won't try again. That's impressively vague. That's intentionally vague. Some things are better if you don't know details. Minjun shifted in his seat, still sore. But Zendaya, the shooting changed things, made me reevaluate priorities. I've been in this life since I was 19, took over from my father when he was killed, spent nearly 10 years building an empire, making money, accumulating power, and for what? So I could get shot in my own office by rivals I barely remember offending? You're thinking of getting out. I'm thinking of transitioning, moving operations toward legitimate business, reducing the criminal elements. It'll take time, years probably. Can't just walk away without causing chaos. But I want something different, something that doesn't end with me bleeding out on a hospital gurney. Zendaya glanced at him, this complicated man who ran a criminal empire but wanted out. That's going to be dangerous. People won't want to let you go, which is why I need to be smart about it, strategic, and why I need people I trust. His hand found hers on the gear shift. People like you. I'm finishing my degree and becoming a doctor. That's my path. I know, and I won't interfere with that. But maybe after you graduate, after you're established, maybe there's room for both things, your career and us, whatever this becomes. You're asking me to wait 2 years to find out if we're compatible. I'm asking you to take it slow. Date me. Get to know me. Let me get to know you. And in 2 years, when you're Dr. Hayes and I'm hopefully running mostly legal operations, we reassess. See if this is real or if it was just proximity and adrenaline. Zendaya pulled up to his building, put the car in park, turned to face him fully. What if I don't want to wait 2 years to figure out if this is real? Then what do you suggest? I suggest we stop pretending this is just business. Stop pretending I'm just your employee and you're just my boss. We both almost died in that restaurant. Life's too short for pretending. She reached over, cupped his face gently, mindful of his injuries. I want to try this. Really try. Not in 2 years. Now. Minjun's eyes searched hers. You're sure? Because Zendaya, my life is complicated, dangerous. You'd be constantly at risk just by association. Your medical career could be jeopardized if the wrong people find out about our arrangement. Everything you've worked for could... She kissed him. Gentle because he was hurt, but firm enough to make her point. When she pulled back, his eyes were wide with surprise and something that looked like joy. I'm sure, she said. Now help me help you upstairs before you tear your stitches. The next 8 months were a crash course in balancing impossible things. Zendaya returned to USC full-time, juggling coursework with emergency calls for Minjun's organization and a relationship that deepened with startling speed. They fell into a rhythm, study sessions at his penthouse while he worked on legitimate business ventures, late-night conversations about dreams and fears, and the complicated ethics of their situation, stolen moments of normalcy between the chaos of their respective worlds. Minjun proved to be attentive and surprisingly domestic. He'd cook Korean food while she studied, teach her phrases in Korean while she taught him medical terminology, massage her shoulders when the stress of organic chemistry threatened to break her. And slowly, carefully, he began extracting himself from the more dangerous aspects of his organization. I'm selling off the gambling operations, he told her one night in November. Legitimate buyers only. Using the money to expand the restaurant into a chain, 5 locations across LA, all legal, all clean. It's a start. Your people won't like that. Gambling's lucrative. Some don't, but I'm not asking permission. I'm the boss. They follow or they leave. His jaw set in that stubborn line she'd come to recognize. I meant what I said. I want a different life. With you. And that means making changes. But change came with costs. In December, 2 of Minjun's lieutenants broke off, started their own operation, taking a dozen men with them. It was a betrayal that hurt him deeply, though he hid it behind strategic responses and calculated retaliation. They'll fail, he said, pacing his office while Zendaya finished an essay on her laptop. They don't have the connections, the capital, the infrastructure. They'll be back within 6 months begging for their positions. Or they'll team up with your rivals and become a bigger problem. Minjun stopped pacing. You're right, which means I need to deal with this before it escalates. He pulled out his phone, started making calls in rapid Korean. Zendaya tried not to listen, tried to focus on her essay about emergency triage protocols, but she caught enough to know he was planning something significant. Minjun, whatever you're planning, be careful. Always am. I'm serious. The last time you had a business dispute, you got shot. I'd rather not repeat that experience. He crossed to her, pulled her up from the couch, wrapped her in his arms despite her protest about interrupting her work. I promise I'll be careful. I promise I won't take unnecessary risks. And I promise that if anything happens, you'll be the first person I call. Okay? Zendaya wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he'd learned from the shooting, that he valued his life enough to prioritize safety. But she'd been in this world long enough now to know that promises meant less than actions. And in Minjun's world, violence was always one bad decision away. January arrived cold and tense. Minjun's splinter group, led by his former lieutenants, had indeed joined with rivals, creating a new syndicate that was aggressively moving into territory Minjun had controlled for years. Protection rackets were being disrupted. Shipments were being intercepted. And word on the street was that the new group wanted Minjun dead or out of LA entirely. They're getting bold, Minjun said during a meeting at the restaurant. Zendaya was upstairs studying. She'd taken to using his office as a quiet workspace since the restaurant during off hours was peaceful. She could hear his voice through the door, tense and angry. Hit 3 of our trucks this week. Took the merchandise, roughed up our drivers. This is a direct challenge. So we hit back, one of his men said. Hard. Make an example. No. That's what they want. Open warfare brings police attention we don't need. Minjun's voice was controlled. We play this smart. Cut off their supply lines. Turn their allies against them. Isolate them until they have no choice but to negotiate on our terms. It was a good strategy. Patient, intelligent. But patience required time they might not have. And 3 days later, on a Wednesday evening in mid-January, everything went wrong. Zendaya was at the restaurant, picking up Minjun for a dinner they'd planned. Her reward for acing her microbiology final. She'd just parked when she heard the screech of tires, saw a black SUV careen around the corner, and slammed directly into Minjun's car in the parking lot. The impact was devastating. Metal crumpled, glass shattered, and through the spiderweb cracks of the windshield, Zendaya saw Minjun slumped forward, blood streaming down his face from where his head had hit the steering wheel. She was running before conscious thought kicked in, phone in hand, dialing 911 while her medical training took over. The SUV's occupants, 3 men she didn't recognize, were climbing out, looking satisfied with their work. One saw her approaching and raised a gun. "Get away from the car," he ordered. "I'm a medical student. He needs help." Zendaya's voice was steady despite her terror. "You want him dead? Fine. Shoot him. But right now he might have a traumatic brain injury and internal bleeding. So either kill him quick or let me check if he's already dying." The men exchanged glances. The one with the gun lowered it slightly. "You got 2 minutes, then we're finishing this." Zendaya yanked open the driver's door. Minjun was conscious but dazed, blood pouring from a gash on his forehead. "Can you hear me? How many fingers?" She held up 3. 3. "I'm fine. Get out of here, Zendaya. They're here for me, not you." "Shut up. You're not fine. You're bleeding, possibly concussed, and..." She pressed her hand to his chest, felt the irregular heartbeat, felt him wince when she touched his left side. "Broken ribs, maybe punctured lung. We need to get you out of this car." "Ambulance is coming," one of the men said. "We hear sirens. We're gone. But boss said make sure he doesn't walk away from this. So, Doc, you got 1 minute to step away." "I'm not leaving him." "Then you're dying with him. Your choice." Minjun grabbed her wrist. "Zendaya, go, please. Don't die for me. You have too much ahead of you. And you have too much behind you to give up now." She turned to the men, desperate. "Whatever he did, whatever this is about, killing him solves nothing. You'll start a war. Police will investigate. You'll never be safe. But if you walk away now, if you let the ambulance take him, you can claim it was an accident. No murder charges, no retaliation. Everyone lives." Boss said, "Your boss isn't here. You are. And you have to decide if you're a murderer or just a guy who caused a car accident." Zendaya's voice turned fierce. "Because I'm not moving. You want to kill him, you kill me too. You ready for that? Ready to shoot an unarmed black woman who's just trying to save a life? That's going to look real good when it hits the news." The man with the gun hesitated. Sirens were getting closer now, the distinctive wail of emergency vehicles. The men looked at each other, calculating. Then the leader swore viciously. "This isn't over. Tell Park he's got 1 week to clear out of our territory, or next time, we don't stop at a car crash." They climbed back into the SUV and sped away just as the ambulance rounded the corner. Paramedics rushed over and Zendaya stepped back, hands shaking violently now that the immediate danger had passed. She gave them a rapid assessment of Minjun's injuries, watched them stabilize his neck, and carefully extract him from the wreckage. "I'm riding with him," she told the lead paramedic. "Are you family?" "I'm his girlfriend, and I'm a medical student. I know his history. He has an allergy to propofol. It's critical that the ER knows." "We'll note it. Come on." Which brings us back to where we started. Songdo Memorial Hospital, room 304. 3:47 a.m. Minjun flatlined on the table with his pulse stopped for the 3rd time, and Zendaya screaming at doctors who didn't understand they were killing him as surely as the car crash had tried to. "Security, get her out," Dr. Rodriguez yelled, still doing compressions. "He's in anaphylactic shock from the propofol." Zendaya fought against the security guard trying to drag her away. "You need to give him epinephrine and antihistamines, now, or he's going to die. Stop the compressions for 10 seconds and check for an anaphylactic response. Hives, swelling, bronchospasm. I'm telling you, this isn't cardiac arrest from trauma. This is an allergic reaction compounding the trauma." Dr. Rodriguez paused mid-compression, really looked at Minjun's chest for the first time, saw the hives erupting across his skin, the swelling in his throat, the discoloration around his lips. Shit, she's right. Stop compressions. Get me epinephrine, 0.5 milligrams IM, and IV diphenhydramine, 50 milligrams. Prep for emergency intubation if the airway swells shut. Move! The room exploded into controlled chaos. Zendaya stopped fighting the security guard, just watched as they administered the medication she'd demanded. 30 seconds. 60. The monitor still showed flatline. Dr. Rodriguez resumed compressions while they waited for the epinephrine to kick in. Come on, Zendaya whispered. Come on, Minjun. You promised you'd be careful. You promised you wouldn't leave me. So fight, damn it. Fight. 90 seconds. 2 minutes. The monitor stayed flat. Doctor, Rodriguez's compressions were getting desperate, sweat dripping down his face. We're losing him. If the next round of epi doesn't work, beep. Everyone froze, stared at the monitor. Another beep. Faint, irregular, but there. A heartbeat. We got a pulse, someone shouted. Weak but present. Blood pressure's 60/40, rising slowly. Keep him stable, monitor for another anaphylactic response, and someone get me his full medical history, because apparently we almost killed him with standard procedure. Dr. Rodriguez looked at Zendaya, who was sagging against the security guard in relief. You, medical student, what's your name? Zendaya Hayes, USC Pre-Med, 3rd year. You just saved your boyfriend's life. That allergy should have been flagged in his records, but it wasn't. If you hadn't been here, if you hadn't pushed, he shook his head. Good catch. Thank you. Zendaya couldn't speak, could only watch as they stabilized Minjun, as his color slowly returned, as the monitor showed a heart beating steady and strong. 12 minutes. He'd been without a pulse for 12 minutes, 9 from the combined cardiac and anaphylactic arrest, 3 from the initial crash trauma. 12 minutes of being clinically dead, and she'd brought him back. Minjun was moved to the ICU after emergency surgery to repair his broken ribs and address internal bleeding from the crash. Zendaya stayed despite Dr. Rodriguez suggesting she go home, rest, process the trauma. She couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until she saw his eyes open and knew he was really, truly alive. She fell asleep in the chair beside his bed, head resting on the mattress near his hand, too exhausted to stay awake, despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. So she didn't see when Minjun's eyes opened hours later. Didn't see him look down at her, sleeping in her bloody waitress uniform, hands still stained with his blood. Didn't see his expression soften with something that looked like wonder. But she woke when his hand moved, fingers threading through her hair gently. Zendaya. Her head shot up. You're awake. Oh God, you're awake. How do you feel? Are you in pain? Should I call the nurse? I feel like I got hit by a car and then died, which apparently I did. His voice was rough but steady. They told me. Said you saved my life. Figured out the allergic reaction when the doctors missed it. You died for 12 minutes. Your heart stopped completely. They were about to call it and... Her voice broke. Minjun, I thought I lost you. I stood there and watched you die, and I couldn't do anything except scream at people to listen to me. But they did listen, and I'm alive because of you. He squeezed her hand weakly. This is the 2nd time you've saved me. Starting to think you're my guardian angel. Guardian angels don't usually wear blood-stained uniforms and yell at doctors. Mine does. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. I'm sorry for putting you through this, for bringing danger into your life, for almost dying and leaving you to... Don't apologize for surviving. Zendaya leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently against his. Just promise me you'll actually leave this life behind. No more waiting, no more strategic transitions. You walk away, Minjun, completely, before the next time kills you for real. I promise, I'm done. The restaurant, the legitimate businesses, those stay. Everything else, I'm out. Let my lieutenants fight over the scraps. Let the rivals take the territory. I don't care anymore. Because Zendaya, I died tonight. And in those 12 minutes, if there was anything like consciousness, all I could think was that I wasted time. Wasted years building an empire that meant nothing compared to having more time with you. Tears spilled down Zendaya's cheeks. You're really going to walk away? I'm really going to walk away. For you. For us. For the future I want to build where I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder. He cupped her face with his free hand. Marry me. Zendaya's breath caught. What? Marry me. I know it's too soon. I know we've only been together 8 months. I know you have a year left of school and then residency, and I'm asking you to tie yourself to a man who comes with complications and baggage and a criminal past that will never fully disappear. But Zendaya, I love you. I have loved you since you walked into my office and negotiated your own contract without flinching. And I don't want to wait until the timing is perfect, because timing is never perfect. I want to start building our life now. You just died 12 minutes ago. You're not in your right mind. I've never been more clear about anything. Marry me, please. Say yes. Zendaya looked at this man, this complicated, dangerous, infuriating man who'd given her back her dreams and then nearly died twice in her arms. This man who was promising to walk away from everything he'd built for a chance at something real. And she realized that the answer had been yes from the moment he'd first offered her a deal, from the first emergency call, from the first time he'd looked at her like she was more than just another employee. Yes, she whispered. You absolute maniac. Yes, I'll marry you. Minjun's smile was radiant despite his injuries. You're going to regret this when you see how impossible I am to live with. I already know how impossible you are. I'm saying yes anyway. She kissed him gently, mindful of his various injuries. But Min-jun, I have conditions. Always with the conditions. First, you walk away from the criminal operations immediately. Full stop. No negotiations, no gradual exits. You announce your retirement and you mean it. Second, we wait until I graduate to actually get married. I want to walk down the aisle as Dr. Hayes, not med student Hayes. Third, you go to therapy, real therapy. Process the trauma, the violence, the complicated relationship with your father's legacy. And fourth, she paused, making sure he was listening. Fourth, we're having a real wedding, big, public, legitimate. I want everyone to see that we're choosing each other, that this is real and legal and not some underground criminal alliance. Those are good conditions. I accept. Minjun's eyes were starting to drift closed, exhaustion and pain medication pulling him towards sleep. But I have one condition of my own. What's that? Promise me you'll never stop being this brave. Never stop fighting for what you believe in. Never let anyone, including me, make you smaller than you are. You saved my life twice, Zendaya. You're the strongest person I know. Don't ever forget that. I promise. She kissed his forehead. Now sleep. Your body needs to heal so you can actually survive long enough to marry me. Bossy. You love it. I do. He squeezed her hand once more before sleep claimed him, leaving Zendaya sitting vigil in the quiet ICU room, contemplating a future that had seemed impossible just hours ago. Minjun recovered slowly. The car crash had done more damage than initially assessed. Broken ribs, ruptured spleen, concussion, and soft tissue damage that would take months to fully heal. But he was alive, and true to his word, he began the process of extracting himself from his criminal empire. It wasn't easy. Some of his people accepted his retirement with understanding and even relief. Others saw it as betrayal. There were threats, attempts at coercion. One former lieutenant even tried to use Zendaya as leverage, showing up at USC's medical school with implied threats. That mistake cost him dearly. Minjun might have been transitioning out, but he still had resources, still had loyalty, and the message he sent was clear. Zendaya Hayes was untouchable. Anyone who threatened her would answer to him personally, retirement or no retirement. After that, the threats stopped. Minjun's organization restructured under new leadership. People he trusted, people who understood that the era of Park Minjun was ending, but the infrastructure would continue. He kept the restaurants, expanded them legitimately, and used his considerable wealth to invest in real estate, tech startups, and community development projects. And through it all, Zendaya continued her studies. She aced her remaining courses, applied for residencies in emergency medicine, and graduated USC in May with honors and zero debt. Dr. Rodriguez, the surgeon who'd nearly lost Minjun in the ER, had been so impressed with her clinical judgment that he'd written her a letter of recommendation that basically guaranteed her first choice of residency programs. The wedding was planned for August, after Zendaya started her residency at Cedars-Sinai. Big and public, like she'd demanded. A blend of Korean traditions and American customs, held at a beautiful venue in Malibu with an ocean view. Shanice was her maid of honor, Mrs. Choi from Pearl Garden catered, and Minjun's legitimate business associates sat alongside Zendaya's family and friends from medical school, No one quite sure how a pre-med student and a former crime boss had ended up here, but everyone willing to celebrate anyway. On the morning of the wedding, Zendaya sat in her dressing room, staring at her reflection. The dress was beautiful, white with subtle Korean-inspired embroidery, elegant without being ostentatious. Her mother sat beside her, doing final adjustments to her hair. "You sure about this, baby girl?" her mother asked softly. "It's not too late to change your mind." "Mama, I've never been more sure of anything. He's a good man, I can see that. But his past made him who he is. Same way my past made me who I am. We're both people who fought for survival, who've made hard choices, who've come out the other side wanting something better." Zendaya met her mother's eyes in the mirror. "And Mama, he gave me my future back, paid for my education, supported my dreams, nearly died twice, and walked away from everything he built because I asked him to. If that's not love, I don't know what is." Her mother smiled, tears gathering. "You're right. And baby, I'm proud of you. So proud. You took a terrible situation, dropping out, working dead-end jobs, and you turned it into something beautiful. You're Dr. Hayes now. You earned that, and you found a partner who sees your worth. That's everything I ever wanted for you." They hugged, careful not to smudge makeup, and then it was time. The ceremony was perfect. Min Jun stood at the altar looking healthier than he had in months, the scars from the car crash hidden beneath an impeccably tailored suit. When Zendaya walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she saw Min Jun's eyes fill with tears. This man who'd commanded respect through fear and power, crying openly at the sight of her. The officiant led them through traditional vows, then stepped back to let them speak their own words. "Zendaya," Min Jun said, voice steady despite the emotion. "You saved my life twice, once in a hospital when my heart stopped, and once in your office when you agreed to take a chance on a man with a complicated past and a dangerous present. You saw potential in me when I'd stopped seeing it in myself. You demanded I be better, and then you stood beside me while I figured out how. I promised to spend every day of our marriage being worthy of the second chance you gave me. I promised to support your dreams the way you supported mine. And I promise that whatever happens, whatever challenges we face them together, as partners, as equals, as people who chose each other despite every reason not to." Zendaya's voice shook when it was her turn. "Min Jun, when you offered me that contract, I thought I was trading 2 years of questionable medical work for my education. I didn't know I was actually signing up for the most terrifying, exhilarating, transformative experience of my life. You challenged me to be brave when I wanted to play it safe. You trusted me with your life and your people when I was still learning who I could be. And you showed me that love isn't about perfection or timing or having everything figured out. It's about choosing someone every single day, especially when things get hard. I promise to choose you, today, tomorrow, for as long as we both live. I promise to be your partner in building the life we both deserve. And I promise that if you ever need saving again, I'll be there, always." They exchanged rings, simple bands engraved with the dates they'd met in the date Min Jun had coded in the hospital. Reminders of beginnings and second chances. And when the officiant pronounced them married, Min Jun pulled Zendaya close and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. The reception was joyful chaos. Korean and American music mixing, traditional dances and modern celebration, speeches that range from heartfelt to hilariously inappropriate. Dr. Rodriguez showed up as a surprise guest, brought by Min Jun as a thank you for saving his life. "You two are either the most romantic couple I've ever seen or the most codependent," Rodriguez joked during his impromptu toast. "She literally brought you back from death. That's some next level in sickness and in health commitment." "It's both," Zendaya called back, laughing. "We're romantic and codependent. We're efficient that way." As the night wound down, Min Jun and Zendaya stood on the venue's terrace, looking out at the ocean, holding hands and breathing in the salt air. "So," Min Jun said, "Dr. Hayes, how does it feel?" "Surreal, terrifying, perfect." Zendaya leaned against him. "How does it feel to be a retired crime boss who's now married to a doctor?" "Like I got away with something. Like I don't deserve this much happiness, but I'm going to hold on to it anyway." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for everything, for saying yes to the contract, yes to the proposal, yes to this life. for not running when things got dangerous, for saving me when I was dying, for believing I could be more than my worst choices. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for giving me back my dreams, for being brave enough to walk away from power for something real. Zendaya turned in his arms, looking up at him. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Despite everything, the past, the complications, the fact that we're both kind of disasters in our own ways, we're going to make this work. We're going to make this work, Minjun agreed, because we're both too stubborn to fail. And because we've already survived the hard part, finding each other. Everything else is just details. They kissed as fireworks exploded over the ocean, Minjun's surprise for his bride, and Zendaya thought about the journey that had brought them here. The contract, the emergency calls, the shooting, the car crash, the 12 minutes of death, every impossible moment that had somehow led to this perfect one. 5 years later, Dr. Zendaya Hayes Park stood in the emergency department at Cedars-Sinai, leading a trauma team through a complex cardiac arrest case. She was known as one of the best emergency physicians in LA, calm under pressure, brilliant diagnostician, teacher who pushed her residents to be exceptional. He's not responding to standard protocols, one of her residents said, panicked as the patient flatlined again. Then we don't use standard protocols. What are we missing? What's his history? Any allergies? Any conditions that would complicate resuscitation? Zendaya scanned the chart, looked at the patient's presentation, and saw it. He's got the same symptoms my husband had. Anaphylactic shock complicating cardiac arrest. Get me epinephrine and antihistamines. Now. The team moved fast, administering the medications. And just like 5 years ago in the same hospital, the patient's heart started beating again. Weak at first, then stronger. Stable. How did you see that? The resident asked, awed. His allergy wasn't in the chart. Experience. And the knowledge that sometimes the obvious answer is wrong. Always look deeper. Always question your assumptions. And when someone's dying, try everything before you give up. Zendaya stripped off her gloves, made sure the patient was stable, and headed for her office. Minjun was waiting there. He often stopped by between his own business meetings to bring her lunch or steal a few minutes together between her cases. He owned 7 Pearl Garden locations now, all thriving, and had just opened a culinary training program for at-risk youth. The criminal empire was a memory. This was his life now. Legitimate business, community investment, and being married to a woman who regularly saved lives. Heard you had an exciting case, he said, pulling her into his arms. Anaphylactic shock masking as cardiac arrest. Saved him with the same protocol that saved you. Zendaya let herself relax into his embrace. 5 years later, and you're still teaching me things. I'm teaching you, Minjun laughed. Zendaya, you're the one who brought me back from death. Everything I know about second chances, I learned from you. Their daughter burst into the office then, 3 years old, all energy and joy, being chased by her grandmother, who was apologizing for the interruption. Mama, Daddy said we could get ice cream if you're done saving people. Did Daddy say that? Zendaya raised an eyebrow at Minjun, who looked appropriately sheepish. I may have implied that ice cream was a possibility if Mama had time. I always have time for ice cream with my family. Zendaya scooped up her daughter, who immediately started signing excitedly about the flavors she wanted. They were teaching her sign language along with English and Korean, wanting her to grow up understanding all the ways people communicated. Let me finish my notes and we'll go. Later that night, after their daughter was asleep and Minjun was reading in bed beside her, Zendaya thought about the journey that had brought them here. The scared waitress who'd taken a dangerous deal. The dying Mafia boss who'd needed saving. The 12 minutes when everything had hung in balance. What are you thinking about? Minjun asked, setting down his book. That night in the hospital, when your heart stopped and I had to fight to make them listen to me. Zendaya turned to face him. I think about it sometimes. What if I hadn't been there? What if they hadn't listened? What if those 12 minutes had been permanent? But you were there, and they did listen, and I'm here. Minjun pulled her close. Zendaya, you've saved countless lives in the 5 years since then. Every patient you've brought back, every diagnosis you've caught, every resident you've trained. That's all possible because you refused to let me die. You didn't just save my life. You saved all the lives I've touched since then, all the people I've employed, all the good I've been able to do. That's your legacy, too. Our legacy, Zendaya corrected. We built this together. Your resources gave me my education. My medical knowledge saved your life. We're partners, remember? Equals. Partners, Minjun agreed, kissing her softly. Equals. And the two people who prove that sometimes the most impossible love stories work out exactly right. They fell asleep tangled together. Two people who'd found each other across impossible circumstances and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their former lives. The criminal and the doctor. The man who'd died for 12 minutes and the woman who'd refused to let death win. Together. Always together. 10 years after that first contract signing, Zendaya was promoted to Chief of Emergency Medicine at Cedars-Sinai. Minjun's restaurant chain had expanded to 15 locations across California. Their daughter was 8, brilliant and kind, fluent in 3 languages and already showing interest in medicine, like her mother, and business like her father. And sometimes, late at night when they couldn't sleep, they'd sit on their balcony and talk about those early days. The emergency calls in warehouses, the shooting at the restaurant, the car crash, and those 12 terrible minutes. All the moments when everything could have gone wrong, but somehow turned out right. Do you ever regret it? Zendaya asked one night. Walking away from the power, the empire, everything you'd built? Not once. Not for a second. Minjun's hand found hers in the darkness. That empire was built on fear and violence and my father's legacy. This life, our family, your career, my legitimate businesses, the good we do in the community, this is built on love and partnership and choice. There's no comparison. What about you? He asked. Do you regret saying yes to that first contract? Taking the risk? It was the scariest, most reckless, best decision I've ever made. Second only to saying yes when you proposed in that hospital room. Zendaya smiled in the darkness. You know what the funny thing is? When you first offered me that deal, I thought I was selling my soul for my education. Turns out I was actually buying my future. Everything I am now, everything we have, it all started with that impossible choice. 2 impossible choices, Minjun raised an imaginary glass. To second chances, Zendaya countered. To 12 minutes, that changed everything. They sat together as the city lights sparkled below them. 2 people who'd survived the impossible and built something extraordinary from the wreckage. The waitress who'd become a doctor. The crime boss who'd become a legitimate businessman. The 12 minutes of death that had led to a lifetime of love. And somewhere in the house behind them, their daughter slept peacefully, dreaming of a future built on the foundation her parents had fought so hard to create. A future where anything was possible if you were brave enough to take the risk. If you were strong enough to demand better. If you were lucky enough to find someone worth saving, and someone who thought you were worth saving too. That was their story. The Korean Mafia boss who'd had no pulse for 12 minutes. The black waitress who'd done what left every doctor frozen, refused to accept death as inevitable. The love that shouldn't have worked but somehow became the thing that saved them both. And if you ask them now, years later, they'd tell you the same thing. Sometimes the most dangerous risks lead to the safest landings. Sometimes the most unlikely people become your home. And sometimes saving someone else's life is really just learning how to save your own. 15 years after that first contract, Zendaya stood on a stage accepting an award for excellence in emergency medicine. The ceremony was at a fancy hotel downtown, packed with the medical community's elite. Minjun sat in the front row, proud and distinguished in his suit, their daughter beside him. 13 now, already talking about medical school. In her acceptance speech, Zendaya talked about the journey. Not the criminal elements, those stayed private, but the essential truth. I was 26 years old and out of options. Someone gave me a chance when no one else would. Someone believed I could be exceptional when I'd stopped believing in myself. And that faith, that investment in my potential, changed everything. It gave me my career. But more importantly, it taught me to see potential in others, to give chances when the world says no, to believe that people can transform if given the right support. She looked at Minjun as she spoke, and he looked back with eyes full of love and pride and shared memory. Everyone in that room saw a successful doctor thanking an anonymous benefactor. But Zendaya and Minjun knew the truth. They'd saved each other over and over again, in hospitals and offices and parking lots and 1,000 quiet moments in between. After the ceremony, after the congratulations and photographs and networking, they drove home together. Their daughter fell asleep in the back seat. Minjun held Zendaya's hand across the console. And in that simple moment, family, safety, love, They both understood how far they'd come. "I'm proud of you," Minjun said quietly. "Always have been. But tonight, seeing you up there, knowing everything you've accomplished, Zendaya, you're extraordinary." "We're extraordinary," she corrected. "You and me. Together. That's where the magic happens." They pulled into their driveway, a beautiful house in Pasadena, far from the restaurant in Koreatown where they'd first met, but still home, carried their sleeping daughter inside, tucked her into bed, and then stood in their bedroom, helping each other out of formal wear, comfortable in the rhythm they'd built over 15 years of partnership. "Minjun," Zendaya said as they were getting ready for bed. Thank you for dying that night, for giving me the chance to save you, for trusting me with your life." He crossed to her, pulled her close. "Thank you for bringing me back, for refusing to let me go, for showing me what it means to truly live instead of just survive." They kissed, soft and familiar and perfect. And in that kiss was everything they'd been through. The contract, the emergencies, the violence, the near-death experiences, the choice to build something better. All of it distilled into one perfect moment of connection. Later, lying in bed with Minjun's arm around her waist, Zendaya thought about the girl she'd been at 26. Broken, hopeless, convinced her dreams were dead. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, the danger and the love and the 12 minutes that would define everything, would she still say yes to that first contract? Absolutely, 1,000 times yes. Because sometimes the most dangerous paths lead to the safest destinations. Sometimes the scariest risks yield the greatest rewards. And sometimes when you're brave enough to save someone else, you end up saving yourself in the process. That was their truth, their story. The Korean Mafia boss and the black waitress. The 12 minutes that changed everything. The love that transformed them both. And it was perfect. Messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. 20 years later, Dr. Zendaya Hayes Park was training the next generation of emergency physicians as head of USC Medical School's emergency medicine department, full circle back to where her own journey had begun. Minjun had transitioned from restaurants to humanitarian work, funding medical clinics in underserved communities across LA and beyond. Their daughter had just finished her first year of medical school, following in her mother's footsteps. And sometimes when Zendaya lectured to her first-year students about never giving up on a patient, about pushing past standard protocols when something didn't feel right, about the importance of advocacy and perseverance, she'd tell them a story. 20 years ago, she'd say, "I wasn't a doctor. I was a medical student working as a waitress, watching my dreams die a little more each day. And then someone took a chance on me, believed I could be exceptional, gave me the resources and support to prove it. But the real lesson came later, in a hospital room, when that same person was dying and every doctor had given up. 12 minutes without a pulse, 12 minutes when everyone said it was over, and I refused to accept it. I fought, I advocated, I demanded they listen. And because I did, that person lived. Not just survived, lived. Went on to change thousands of lives through humanitarian work. Went on to be my partner in building a life I'd never imagined possible." She'd pause, look around the room at all those young, eager faces. That's the lesson. Never give up. Not on your patients. Not on yourself. Not on the people who believe in you. Because you never know which 12 minutes might change everything. Which decision might save not just one life, but all the lives that person will touch. You have that power. Use it wisely. Use it bravely. Use it with the knowledge that sometimes the impossible is just the difficult, waiting to be proven wrong. The students never knew the full story, the criminal empire, the shootings, the complicated ethics of it all, but they understood the essential truth. Dr. Hayes was someone who'd fought for her dreams and won, someone who'd brought people back from death through sheer force of will and medical knowledge, someone who believed in second chances because she'd been given one herself. And that, more than any textbook or technique, was what made her an extraordinary teacher. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Minjun recreated their first date, the one that had never happened because he'd been shot before they could go. Fancy restaurant, ocean view, the works. But this time, he made it through dinner without any assassination attempts. 20 years, Zendaya marveled. 2 decades since I signed that insane contract. Best business decision I ever made, Minjun said with a smile. Though I'm pretty sure hiring someone to be your illegal off the books medic and then falling in love with them is against some kind of HR policy. Definitely against policy. Also probably illegal on multiple levels. Zendaya laughed. But here we are. 20 years, one daughter, 2 near-death experiences, countless lives saved, and a love story that still doesn't make sense on paper. The best things never make sense on paper. Minjun reached across the table, took her hand. They only make sense in practice, in the living of them. And Zendaya, living this life with you, building this family, supporting your career, becoming someone I actually like, it's been the greatest privilege of my existence. Even better than running a criminal empire? Especially better than that. That was power. This is purpose. There's no comparison. He pulled out a small box, slid it across the table. I got you something. Inside was a necklace, delicate gold chain with a pendant shaped like a heartbeat monitor, the line showing 12 minutes of flatline before resuming normal rhythm. It was beautiful and morbid and perfect. It's to remember, Minjun said, the 12 minutes that changed everything, the moment when you refused to let me go, the beginning of everything we became. Zendaya's eyes filled with tears. I love it, and I love you. Even though you're impossibly romantic and sentimental for a former crime boss. Only with you. Everyone else still thinks I'm terrifying. You are terrifying, just in a different way now. She fastened the necklace, felt the weight of it against her skin, a reminder of death and resurrection, of love forged in crisis and strengthened through choice. Thank you for this, for everything, for being brave enough to walk away from who you were to become who you are. Thank you for seeing who I could be when all I saw was who I'd been. Minjun stood, pulled her to her feet. Dance with me. There was no music, but they danced anyway, right there on the restaurant's patio overlooking the ocean. 2 people who'd started as employer and employee, who'd survived impossible odds, who'd built a life that defied every expectation. Moving together like they'd been made for this, for each other, for exactly this moment. And somewhere in the city behind them, their daughter was studying for her next medical school exam, building her own future on the foundation they'd created. The legacy of 2 people who'd refused to accept the limitations the world imposed, who'd fought for second chances and third chances and as many chances as it took to get it right. That was the real story. Not just about the 12 minutes when Minjun's heart stopped, but about all the moments after, the choices, the growth, the dedication to becoming better. The conscious decision made every single day to choose love over fear, partnership over power, purpose over prestige, the Korean Mafia boss who died and been reborn, the black waitress who'd refused to let death win, and the 20 years of beautiful, complicated, extraordinary life they'd built from that impossible beginning. Perfect, messy, real, and absolutely undeniably worth every risk they'd taken to get there. Epilogue. 30 years after that first contract, Dr. Zendaya Hayes Park published a memoir, not about the criminal elements, those stayed private, protected by NDAs and discretion, but about the journey from waitress to doctor, about second chances in the people who believe in you when you've stopped believing in yourself, about 12 minutes that defied medical odds and changed 2 lives forever. The book became a bestseller. Medical students read it for inspiration. Young people from underprivileged backgrounds saw themselves in her story, and somewhere in there, between the lines about perseverance and determination, was a love story, quiet, powerful, transformative. Minjun read it on their anniversary, tears streaming down his face at seeing their story through her eyes. Seeing himself as she saw him, not the criminal he'd been, but the man he'd become, the partner, the father, the humanitarian. The person who'd been given 12 extra minutes and used them to build something meaningful. You made me the hero, he said, closing the book. You were the hero. You just didn't know it yet. Zendaya kissed him softly. We both were. That's the point. We saved each other. Over and over again. And we're still saving each other. Every single day. And it was true. 30 years of choosing each other. Of fighting for their love when it would have been easier to walk away. Of building something beautiful from broken pieces, of proving that sometimes the most unlikely stories have the happiest endings. The Korean Mafia boss and the black waitress. The 12 minutes that shouldn't have ended in survival but did. The love that defied every odd and became legendary. That was their truth, their legacy, their forever.